guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from the Rabbit Hole Designs. This is Balloon Animals 1 and 2, and then also for the sentiment I'm using Sentimentally Speaking, and then these two stencils are the Candy Twist and the Pinwheel. We're actually going to start with those. I knew that I wanted to have a black background to really help the balloon animals kind of like pop off the page as the focal point. So I'm using my sticky mat here to hold my stencil in place. And then I'm actually going to use my paper pouncer to just put black soot distress ink right over top of this. Now, there are black embossing powders or black glitter embossing powders on the market, but I typically tend to shy away from them because they tend to be a bit more messy when you can use black ink and a clear and still get the same look. So basically I have distress ink is made to emboss with. It stays wet longer. And if you didn't want to do the embossing, you wouldn't have to. You can see here, you can still very much see the pattern. But I'm going to be using some clear sparkle embossing powder, and I'm just going to, sprinkle that onto the background. Right now it looks like it's white, but when it is melted, it will be clear and it will have a lot of glitters in it. So it's almost like being able to create your own glitter paper. Since I wanted these to be like really fun kids cards, like kids birthday cards, especially your littler ones, enjoy like lots of textures and interactive pieces that they can kind of be excited about. And so, having that, even though it's a tone on tone pattern that you can feel, will give them something that's kind of tactile that they can touch and play with when they get their card. So here you can see it melts down really beautifully. And then once I'm done melting it, I'll kind of show it to you in the light. Never, the sparkle is never captured as well on camera as it is in real life, but they are genuinely very glittery and super fun. So we're going to do the same thing for the pinwheel. I just followed the same process with the paper pouncer and the black soot distress ink. If you wanted them to be a little bit lighter, you could use the black soot oxide, and you would have more of like a chalkier finish. But so the pinwheel here is actually in the negative space. And I think because I chose this technique to do that with, it's a little bit harder to see the pinwheel shape. But ultimately, for my card, it's not the shape that matters so much as it is the physical texture of it. That's the whole point of putting it in the background. But here you can see, again, nice and glittery. We're going to set those aside, and then we are going to get to our stamping. So it's funny and I think this is probably true in anything that's creative. Sometimes I think we have a hard time seeing the potential of something until we see how somebody else uses it. And I think these two stamp sets are one of those. Like, they're very cute, but they don't necessarily look like something that, unless you do that for a living. Like maybe you have somebody who does balloon animals for a living, or, you have a balloon animal kind of theme. I don't necessarily know that you would be looking for these types of stamps, but I think once you see them kind of brought to life with the bright colors, you can see how fun that they are. So in there, there's again, two different sets. There's a snail, a flower, a little monkey on a palm tree, a dog, an octopus, a butterfly, a crab, and a bunny. I'm using all of them. So I did go ahead and stamp them down, and then I am going to color them with my Copic markers. This is a very simple way, especially if you're just learning how to use Copic markers. We're going to color these really simply, still so that they have the dimension, but not so much that we have to have a ton of thought behind it. So if you're just new and you're beginning to card making, these are some good ways that you can use them. So I did color my eyeballs white, and also eventually I'll come back and get that little bunny's cottontail. But basically you want to look, when we're talking about adding shading, where 2 points meet or where one lays on top of the other. Because balloons are smooth, right? We're not creating any texture in the balloons. They're very smooth. We want a lot of smooth color. We're not going to be doing, excuse me, a lot of like flicking or anything like that. We're really just going to be doing kind of straight lines. And I talk about this in my other videos as well. When you start with I start with my darkest color, you'll put that line down. And then when you go in with your dark mid-tone, you'll go right over top of that dark color and then extend it out just slightly. And we're going to do that again and again until we get to our lightest color, which will be our highlight. So here you can see we only have just a couple of little slivers of white left, and that's going to be maintained for our highlight color. Because alcohol markers are transparent, you can use lighter colors to kind of bleach out darker colors. So even if you feel like you got a little heavy-handed with your midtones, going over those colors with your lighter color will help you to achieve more dimension. So when we're talking about the balloons, usually the way that I add the shading is I find the inside edge that would have like the darkest portion, and you can see in the illustration how it has just like kind of a slightly longer like kind of tick mark. Like if you look at the leaves of this flower, you can see how there's just a slightly longer line on the right hand side. It's down to the bottom, and on the left hand side it's up into the top. So where you have that little line, you're going to want to put your darkest color right in that area. And that is going to help us to create lots of dimension. And then for the next section that we put the darker line on, it's going to be the exact opposite of where we put it. So right now we're doing the pinks. I think there's something else I color pink too. The snail. So here it has these little lines. So I'm going to use my darkest color to extend those lines out. And then where the snail shell is meeting the body, I am going to have darker shading. And then where the center is meeting the body, I'm going to have some darker shading. And then again, going in with that mid-tone, going right over top of that darker color, extending it out just a little bit. And then going again with our lighter mid-tone, going right over top of that second or the darker mid-tone and, you know, extending it out. And then the highlight color comes in and fills out the rest of the white. I hope that I'm explaining that well, or at least visually you can see what I'm doing. So for the pinks, I chose to use 4 colors, but for the yellows, I'm only going to use 3 because yellow is a much lighter color. And especially when we're talking about balloons, like they fill up with air, you're not going to have, it's going to be pretty transparent where it's at its most full, like here with this little snail body. So I'm going to, you know, do my darkest shading where it's meeting the shell and the other portion of the body. I will add a little bit of shading kind of on the right-hand side, and then the lightest part is going to be in the fullest area. So what I showed you there is the fact that my colors are bleeding through the back. And that is important to have markers that are full, because that is where you're going to get the blending. So you want to make sure that there's enough ink on the paper for it to be blending. So you really want to make sure that your markers are not streaky or running low on ink. You'll see here in a little bit when I get to the greens, I'm actually going to refill my marker on screen so you guys can see how I do it. Normally I would cut that portion out, but especially since I felt like this was more of a beginner level coloring, the results don't look beginner level, but the approach is very beginner friendly. I decided to leave in that portion of filling the marker because maybe you don't know how to do that or you haven't seen somebody do it. So here, the greens were back to 4 colors, again, just because that lightest color where the balloon portion is most full, you know, it would be really thin and really transparent and very light. So the green, obviously it's a palm tree, so we're adding the palm tree. If you are somebody who is more of a intermediate colorist, you can change up the coloring just slightly, or if you're a beginner colorist who, you know, wants to kind of really challenge yourself, that's fine. We're here for all levels of colorists. So with the flower, this is going to be, see how, remember I told you we were going to fill in those parts where the line was a little extra and then add the color to the opposite of the area. This is the first time that you're really seeing me leave any kind of room on the balloon. Like, I didn't take the darkest color all the way down. I left a little bit of room for a lighter color. And that is something that you can do, you know, if you're more intermediate or maybe a little bit more comfortable. And we'll, as we progress through the balloon coloring, you'll see this more often, and it'll give me a better opportunity to explain it. So as far as the colors go, I just chose really bright, happy colors because I wanted them to almost look like neon, kind of how they would pop off of that black background, because we all know kids like, you know, really bright, fun colors. And honestly, I guess I must be a kid at heart because bright, fun colors are my favorite. So cards like this are really fun to do where it's not necessarily about the realism. Like I can still be really happy with my shading and the dimension that I'm getting on the balloons. But I don't necessarily have to worry about using more muted colors, which is typically what you see in more realistic colorings. These are just, you know, they're just to be a good old time, honestly. And like, I think this would be really fun to stamp out with your kids and let them color them however they would like to color them. So here is how I fill my markers. So I take my tweezers. Typically I use my Hero Arts or my Honeybee because they're black. I pull out the chisel tip after I take off both of the caps. I put in a certain amount of drops. And if you're not paying attention, you can see here, like I overfilled it and it dripped off the bottom. That marker is too full. That's not what you want. You don't want it dripping off the bottom. So usually I will count to like 10 and then I will check the nib to see how moist it is, and then I will maybe do another 10 and just kind of check and see. If you're just, you know, pouring in ink, it will eventually get too saturated and it will come out the other end. I think we're going to do a pink one, maybe a pink one here in a little bit where we do another kind of refill and you'll be able to see it where we don't overfill it. But then basically I just take the tweezers. It keeps my fingers clean. I take the tweezers, I put the chisel nib back in, and then I put both of my caps back on. Now, there are other people who say that the only proper way to fill a Copic marker is by weighing them and seeing how many grams they are. So that way you know you have enough ink in there. I'm going to be honest, I'm not that organized or that precise. So I just drop them in and then I look at the nib to make sure that it is nice and wet and I have plenty of moisture down there, and then I call it. Now I used to, this was many years ago, like I would have like kind of like a maintenance day for my markers where I would refill all of them. But I don't do that anymore. I just fill them as needed because I am, you know, pretty much coloring every single day and I don't have time to sit down and dedicate a whole day to just refilling my markers. If you do, some of the darker colors sometimes will dry out a little bit faster. Because they just don't, they have more pigment in them, and so they can get a little bit tacky and things like that. If they dry out, you can replace the nibs on Copic markers as well if your nib has gotten dried out from a color that you haven't used. So moving on. So I just basically chose fun colors that I thought would really work nicely together. So you guys can do whatever you want. There was one of the design team members for the rabbit hole designs who did like I think it was the little dog. They did it like all in blue watercolor and I loved that. It looked great. So don't feel like you have to switch up the colors like I did. You could do them all one color and they'd still be really, really cute. So here, I think for the bunny, here, see how I'm leaving that just a little bit of a gap? This is the more intermediate one that I was talking about. So basically, I'm leaving that little bit of a gap for what we call reflective light, so that it would be just a little bit lighter on the edges. And I'm still coloring it the same. I'm still going in with my mid-tone, going completely over the dark and extending it out a bit. But that edge, I will not fill in that edge until I get to my light mid-tone. And this just helps it to look just a little bit more realistic, like you have that, kind of bounced or reflective light. So if you're looking to kind of challenge yourself a little bit, then I only did it on the pieces that you could see all of them. Like, see how for the leg that's tucked behind on this dog, I did go right up against the previous leg. That's because the leg in front would be casting a shadow. So really that reflective light would only apply to the outside pieces that you can see them in their entirety. The rest of them would get shadows where two places meet, just like we would normally do. So this one, we're going to add in some orange. And again, because of the way that I colored the previous ones, like right up against it, the only place I'm going to put that reflective light is for the bottom piece, because there's nothing that's pressed up against the bottom portion of the body. So you would just have a little bit of that reflective light. And, like I said, I did all of mine in bright colors. I kind of switched it up. So for like my little monkey, I ended up doing him or her a orange and a yellow, because I knew I was going to do the tree base. I didn't want to bring in any brown. And I'm sure, like in real life, if you had gone somewhere where they were doing balloon animals, they probably would have brown, but that did not go with my aesthetic. So I just did the base of the purple, or the tree purple, because I thought that was a little bit more fun. I knew it would play nicely with the yellow and the orange monkey, because yellow and purple are complementary colors. But basically, there isn't a wrong way to do this. You can go right up against those lines, those black lines, and just kind of fill them in. That's what I'm doing here with this body in the middle. It is up against something on both sides. So I just went around all of the edges with the darkest color and kind of let the center be the lightest. But these are super fun, and we're going to do some things to make them even more fun besides the coloring. One of the things, which was the first idea I had as soon as I saw them, is we're going to add some super fun googly eyes. Now I have kind of a variety pack that has all different sizes in it. I will link that below if you are interested in picking up some little googly eyes. I think if you make cards for kids, for your grandkids, for your own kids, sometimes I make cards for my son for his friends' birthdays when I know we have birthday parties coming up. He's getting a little older now. I don't know if they'll accept my googly eyed cards because he's getting into the preteen years. But I think that they're super fun. And as an adult now, I think that they would be cute to give to another one of my friends, who would appreciate the fact that my card is handmade and that it has cute little googly eyes. But the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so this card glows in the dark. And I'm going to do that with some Wow embossing powder. So that will be after all of the coloring is done. I originally bought this, oh man, I'm trying to think. It was so many years ago. So my friend Michelle does Case Me a Christmas, and she's been doing it for probably 6 or 7 years now. But the first one that she ever invited me to, I honestly don't know if it was the first year she did it or not. But back then she would let people pick her theme. And then, she would have to make a card with that, and she would try, to get a bit of a guest to play along with her. So the theme that she asked me to participate in was somebody suggested she make a glow in the dark card. And so I did, and I did it with it's so old now, I'll have to see if I can find, I'm sure the video is still on my channel. It's not like I've deleted any videos, right? But I did because it was a Christmas card, I did kind of like a winter scene out the window, and I made the snowflakes that were falling outside the window glow in the dark. which was really fun. I mean, I hadn't used it, but of course, because my husband will tell you, as most crafters are, I'm a hoarder of craft supplies because you never know when you're going to need it again. You just don't. I'll come back to that in a minute where I was right and we needed it and he made me get rid of it. Because, you know, like all good wives, I want to tell that story. But anywho, so I've had it since then. I haven't really used it too much, but I thought that that would be a super fun way to make the card a little bit more interactive, as, you know, they could, you know, take them into, well, honestly, when I was checking them, I was taking them into my closet because my bathroom has like a skylight. And the kids' bathroom has a window, and I didn't want to go downstairs. So I was just like walking into the back part of my closet and shutting the door on myself so that I could see if they were glowing in the dark. But anyway, so speaking of craft supplies, so the other day, we have 2 dogs. And if you have dogs, you know that, you know, if your dog lays on your blankets or your dog lays on your pillows, it smells like dog. And so we have throw pillows on our couch. We have 4 of them. And they have just free floating, like stuffing, free floating, like batten in them. And years ago, I had bought some polyfill. I think it was during COVID, honestly, and I was trying to like make pillows and stuff. But anyway, my husband was like, "You're a hoarder. It's been in our basement for however many years. Like, you don't need this. We're going to go ahead and get rid of it." So I did. I ended up, you know, giving it to, I think, honestly, somebody who was like a kindergarten teacher or something, that with a bunch of other craft supplies that I was no longer using. And I just put it on Facebook Marketplace for free and they came and picked it up. So when we discovered that like our pillows were heftily smelling like dogs and we weren't going to be able to just, you know, take the covers off and wash them because we had free floating stuffing, I was like, I'll just buy new stuffing. Like, we'll take all the stuffing out, we'll pitch it, and then we'll just get new stuffing. And I told him, I had this stuffing. I owned this stuffing, but you made me get rid of it. So I will take any opportunity that I can to tell him that I was right. No, I mean, yes, but also no, that's not right. Don't be that way. Don't be like me. So there I missed the little leg, but here what I'm doing is, because I know my background is black, right? We've already created that. And I want the background to stay, you know, I want them to blend in. I want it to appears like they're glowing. So I want that black background. The dyes for these are obviously going to cut that white edge. So what I'm doing here is I'm coloring that white edge black. So any parts in between, like you could see where like the tail comes down, I colored that black. And then I'm just going around the edge of the stamping just wide enough so that I know that when I use the die to cut it out, it will be a black border. Now here is where comes in the embossing. So I left all of my stamps in, and now that I have all of them outlined and, you know, they're colored in and everything else, I'm going to try to over stamp them. Now, this is a little bit challenging because I'm working on 2 pieces of paper at the same time, so trying to find where they line up is a little difficult. If you run into that problem, you can remove them from your stamp positioner. In my case, it's the Misty, and you can look straight down at them and see where they get lined up with their black line, and then you can just pick them back up with the door. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you. You guys know I believe in transparency. I did this, and the first time it worked really well. I'm going to treat it with my anti-static tool to make sure I don't get this glow-in-the-dark embossing powder anywhere that I don't want it. I'm going to ink up my stamps with Versamark, which is just a clear, sticky embossing ink. Side note, back to the backgrounds, if you don't have black soot or you don't want to use black ink, you could use this to pounce through your stencils and then use that clear sparkle and get a very similar effect. You don't have to have the black. But anyway, so I'm inking them up really, really well, and then I'm going to stamp them down. Now, normally when I emboss, I stamp them twice. But here I was worried about them moving because there's so many inner working parts that I did not stamp them twice. I wish that I would have. I also wish that I would have stood up from my desk and done the CPR method, but I didn't. So because of that, you're going to see when I put on the embossing powder, see that top portion of the butterfly? there's nothing there. And it's because my stamp didn't make contact with my paper because I didn't stand up and give it proper pressure with all of those stamps in it. So after I did this, I did end up going back in and stamping them a second time. When I stamped them the second time, they did not line up. That's just me being real, okay? Some people have asked me in the past when I would go back in and like re-outline all of my stamps by hand, why I would do that and why I didn't just restamp them. That's why. Because sometimes even though you think you've got it lined up, it isn't necessarily always perfect. But I didn't take the time to do it the way that it should have been done. So please learn from my mistake. Make sure if you have the opportunity to stamp them twice in the same go, you do. Make sure you're really inking up your images and make sure you're giving really good pressure. So here I went ahead and, I'm heat setting these. One thing that I did not think about, that I don't think ends up being a big deal, but just something of note, because it's a glow-in-the-dark embossing powder, it's not clear and it's not black. So you can see where the glow-in-the-dark is kind of sitting on top of those lines, which I did not know would happen. I don't think that it's a big deal, but I'm, again, just trying to be transparent. So here I'm lining up all of the coordinating dies. I'm going to tape them in place and then I'm going to set them aside, because I'm also going to stamp and heat emboss the sentiment. Now, I chose the happy birthday for both cards because I thought that that was fitting. So in order to stamp them in one go, I just scoop my black cardstock up, just about an inch so that I can stamp the first happy birthday at the bottom. I stamp it twice with white pigment ink. I just find that that gives me the best for embossing. And then I'm going to scoot it down and I'll be able to stamp my second one so that I can get the stamping done in the same time. And then I can do the embossing both at the same time. So I went ahead and used a white detail embossing powder, melted that down, and then I will use those coordinating dies from the Sentimentally Speaking to cut out that birthday. One of them I will use just that way, and the other one I am going to, here is where I'm showing you. See how it's double stamped, which is not ideal. But anywho, so I went in and I tried to see if I could color over the embossing. I know that alcohol markers will color over embossing, but I didn't know if it would be enough to dampen the glow-in-the-dark effect. Also, please excuse the fact that my camera is out of focus. My child, who says that he did not touch my camera one night after he was supposed to be in bed, which I have to tell you I do not believe, because my camera did not have any issues focusing the entirety of the time that I was making the card up until this next day when I was finishing everything up, and then it had trouble focusing. But anywho, so I used the black on the outside edge and it was enough to kind of dampen the glow-in-the-dark results. Also, same thing here, like I'm going in with the RV09, which is the darkest color of the pink, and I'm going over that embossing, and it did work. Here's all of my little googly eyes in my little variety pack. They're just in a plastic container, but aren't these so cute? How much character do these have once you put the little googly eyes on, right? Like, so cute. So I picked some, decently sized ones for the ones that actually have eyeballs drawn in: the crab, the octopus, the snail. And then for the monkey, the dog, and the bunny, and the butterfly, I used these much smaller ones. I thought that they were totally adorable. Look how cute they look. So now I first put them down with the glue in my precision glue press, which this one I believe has the tonic glue in it. And they kept falling off. Now, I don't think it had anything to do with the glue itself. I actually think it has to do with the super slick coating that is on the back of the eyeballs. So how I ended up fixing that, and you'll see it here in a little bit, is I ended up going in with glossy accents. And glossy accents will glue metal, plastic. I mean, it'll just glue just about anything. And so I did go in with the glossy accents, and that did work. That did hold. So just know that either you may want to use a dry adhesive when using the little googly eyes, or you may want to use a stronger adhesive than you normally do. I wanted to pop these up. I thought that would be super fun. So once I got them into position, I did this one with more of like the kind of like beachy kind of sea life one. So it's got the octopus, the crab, and then the monkey with the palm tree. I did those, that way. And I thought about doing them. That's what you see me doing here. Like, oh, I could make them look like they were floating balloons, so I could add some string to it. I did not end up liking that. I'm just being honest. We tried it. I didn't like it. That's okay. I just ended up cutting off the strings. So it was no big deal. I do encourage you to kind of like play around and try different things. You never know unless you try it. And if you don't like it, that's okay. We can always undo it. So here is where I figured out, see how my eyeballs have just fallen off. Here is where I switched over to the glossy accents. And that is, now it's been over, I think, about a week since I made them. And they're still holding strong. So I don't think that they're going to be going anywhere for the foreseeable future. So I just put those back on. And I think the little googly eyes just make the card. It's so fun. I tried to show it in the video, how they glow in the dark, but I didn't get a really great, because they just kind of fade a little bit fast when it's nighttime, and my craft room is made to have lots of light because I have to photograph cards. So I did have a little bit of a trouble, but in addition to the video, I also took some still shots, which I will share with you in the video, and then I will also share those over on Instagram. So this is the completed cards. I just stacked that happy birthday sentiment just for a different look. And then here is the video, if you can kind of see the little glow in the dark for just a minute. And then these are the still shots. So this is the one that has the beach. You can kind of see the glowing edges. And then this one is the other one that has the, the flower, the dog, the bunny, all of that. You can definitely see the glowing edges in this one. And then here's both the cards again. I hope this inspires you to kind of make some fun cards with your kids or for your kids. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.